Today we're looking at a commentary on Douglas Murray's observations about right-wing anti-Semitism. It argues the hatred is envy, and the nationalists should emulate Zionism, not attack it.
It's a really provocative thesis. Strong bones intellectually, but the execution, well, I think it needs some rhetorical tightening if it's going to actually persuade a hostile audience. So let's just get right into the critique.
Okay, so first up, we're going to start with the core diagnosis of the piece, where the author says the root cause is envy and uses the Cain and Abel story to make the point.
And this brings us right to the first major risk in the script. I mean, diagnosing political grievances just as jealousy or envy, you really risk losing your audience if you do that without first establishing some empathy.
Yeah, the current draft jumps from Douglas Murray's very nuanced point about homelessness, that quote, "I don't have an Israel,"
Right.
straight into this big theological argument about Cain.
And that transition just feels so abrupt. I mean, think about the emotional state of the person listening to this.
Okay.
Murray is talking about a very real, modern pain, this feeling of displacement. He's referencing Huellebeck, the fear of cultural replacement. It's a visceral anxiety.
And the commentary just pivots to calling it jealousy.
Exactly. It jumps straight to your Cain killing Abel. And my concern is that, well, it just sounds dismissive, reductive. If you do that right out of the gate, you're not going to persuade anyone.
It feels like a moral judgment before the emotional connection is even there.
Precisely. If I'm a listener and I feel like my country is slipping away, and you tell me, oh, you're just jealous? Well, that immediately puts my guard up.
It shuts them down.
It shuts them down completely. You're basically pathologizing their politics instead of engaging with them. You're telling them their pain is actually a sin.
I can see how that would alienate the exact person we're trying to reach. It feels like we're skipping a step in the persuasion process.
We are. You're skipping the join phase and going straight to lead. You have to join them in their reality before you can lead them to a hard truth about their own envy.
So the suggestion for improvement here is to validate that feeling of homelessness Murray talks about. Do that first, before you pivot.
Yes. We need to build a bridge between Murray's empathy and the host's critique. Murray actually says, I understand that as an impulse.
Right.
The script has to mirror that. You have to acknowledge the wound before you diagnose the infection.
So how would we do that concretely? Because you don't want to validate the anti-Semitism, just the anxiety underneath.
That's the key distinction, right? So instead of jumping to, you are Cain, you could start by saying something like, it's understandable to feel displaced in your own country. Like Murray says, it's terrifying to feel like you don't have a home. That anxiety is real. But, you'd continue, the mistake is thinking that tearing down the Jewish state will somehow rebuild your own.
That's much stronger. It treats the homelessness as a real thing, not just a character flaw.
Exactly. It treats their anxiety as a legitimate political problem, even if their reaction to it is morally wrong. And then, once you've done that, then you can bring in Cain and Abel.
Okay.
You can say when we feel helpless, we look for someone to blame just as Cain did. But you've earned the right to say that.
It grounds the theology in their reality. It stops it from feeling like a lecture and makes it feel like a diagnosis.
Correct. It transforms the script from an accusation into an explanation.
All right, let's move to the solution part of the piece. The idea that the right should emulate Zionism. I think we need to look at the tonal balance.
This is a really delicate area. And frankly, the current draft, it kind of falls into a trap of what I'd call condescending benevolence.
That's a strong term. What phrasing gives you that impression?
It's phrases like, we'd love to share that with you, and Israel should be a shining example, and learn from us. Just think about how that sounds to a hostile listener. If they're already resentful, already feeling inferior because they don't have an Israel, hearing that they now need to sit at the feet of the group they envy, that's just going to make it worse.
It creates a teacher-student dynamic, which implies a hierarchy.
Exactly. And if the root emotion is a bruised ego, framing the Jewish state as the teacher just bruises that ego more. Come learn from us because we figured it out and you haven't. That's a really hard pill to swallow for a nationalist, angry about their own country's decline.
You're almost accidentally confirming their bias that Jews think they're better than everyone else.
Precisely. Even with the best intentions, the reception will be hostile. We have to be so careful not to sound like we're patting them on the head.
So the suggestion is to reframe it, move away from learning from us to something more like shared parallel struggles.
We had to shift the perspective. Zionism should be presented as a proof of concept, for the nationalism they want. Not a classroom lesson. It shouldn't be, we're the best, copy us. It should be, this works. You could try it.
That changes the dynamic a lot. Instead of Jews are the teachers, it becomes Israel is the evidence that your own goals are achievable.
Precisely. We need to empower the listener. So the script could use language like, you want strict borders? Israel did it. You want unapologetic pride? Israel did it. You don't need to destroy Israel. You need to demand the same resolve from your own leaders.
I see the difference. That frames Israel as a peer who's navigated the same threats, not as a superior moral authority.
It shifts the dynamic from student-teacher, which hurts the ego, to allies-peers, which actually boosts the ego. It says, you can do this too, not let me show you how to be like me.
It turns Zionism from an object of envy into a blueprint for success.
Yes, and a blueprint is neutral. A blueprint isn't arrogant. It's just a tool. And if you frame Israel as a tool for their success, you might just bypass that envy response entirely.
Okay, moving on to structure. There's that section on the logical incoherence of anti-Semites. Hating Jews for leaving, but also for staying.
This part is so critical. And I think this point is just vastly underutilized in the current script. It's sort of treated like a passing observation, but it should be a central pillar of the whole argument.
The source material mentions that damned if you do, damned if you don't contradiction. And Murray has that amazing example of New York Jews talking about Aliyah
and getting screamed at by the same people who say they don't belong in the U.S. It's a slam dunk argument. It proves the hatred is irrational.
But the piece just mentions it and moves on.
It moves on way too quickly to the spiritual analysis. It's a huge missed opportunity to really anchor the logic before you get into the psychology.
So the risk is that by jumping to the spiritual motive too fast, you're glossing over the sheer absurdity of the logic?
Yes. You have to prove they're being irrational first. Close the door on logic before you open the door to psychology. If you don't, the listener might still think their hatred has some rational basis. You have to show them the glitch in their own matrix.
It corners them. Logic. If they can't answer the contradiction, they're forced to look for another explanation for their feelings.
Exactly. If you just say you're envious, they can just deny it. But if you show them you hold two contradictory beliefs at the same time, they can't deny that. The cognitive dissonance is undeniable.
So the suggestion is to make this contradiction the central hook of the logic section before you even bring up envy.
Exactly. You could rhetorically stack these contradictions right at the top. Don't just mention it. Dramatize it. Present it as this impossible standard.
So you could say something like, they say go to Israel, but when we go, they say Israel is an ethno-state. They say you don't belong here, but then scream when we leave.
Yes! Lay it all out. Force the listener to confront that, and once you've done that, they have to ask, why? Why is it impossible? And then, only then, do you hit them with the answer, because it's not about geography. It's about envy. It's Cain and Abel.
That creates a much more compelling narrative. It uses the logical contradiction to create a kind of mystery, and then the jealousy argument becomes the solution.
It makes the Cain and Abel point feel like the necessary conclusion to a logical proof, rather than just a sermon. You satisfy the intellect before you appeal to the soul.
Okay, that brings us to a more technical point about flow. Integrating the promo for the documentary, The Great Reversal.
Right. This is a classic stumble. The way it transitions from this deep philosophical discussion right into an ad, it just feels jarring.
We're talking about the soul of the West, the first murder, the Garden of Eden, and then suddenly it's click the link below. It just breaks the spell.
It really does feel like a commercial break. But the frustrating thing is, the content of the documentary, Reversing Cause and Effect, is actually a perfect fit for the jealousy argument.
The connection is there, but it's not being made. It feels like two separate things. Here is the philosophy, and here's our ad.
That's it. Cain blaming Abel is the ultimate reversal of cause and effect. Cain is the aggressor who pretends to be the victim. That is exactly what the documentary is about. You're leaving narrative money on the table.
So the suggestion is to weave the documentary's premise into the conclusion of the commentary. Make the ad feel like the climax.
Precisely. The film is the proof of the commentary. It's the evidence locker.
So we could create a transition. Something like, just as Cain reversed the moral order to blame Abel for his own shortcomings, the historical narrative has been reversed to blame Israel.
Yes. And then you follow up with, this psychological reversal isn't just a biblical story, it's a historical strategy. And that is exactly what our new film, The Great Reversal, exposes, from 1948 to Oslo to October 7th.
That connects the psychological diagnosis of the young right directly to the historical analysis of the conflict.
It transforms the sales pitch into an educational resource the listener now feels they need to fully grasp the point you just made. It says, "You liked this analysis? The film is this analysis applied to history."
Okay, finally, let's talk about the sewer metaphor.
Right. Murray's use of that imagery about the post-WW2 generation passing away and the rats coming out of the sewers.
It's a chilling image, and it connects it to Tom Stoppard realizing it's back.
It is the emotional core of the piece. It raises the stakes from just politics to, well, existential dread. But I think the commentary mentions the quote, and then the gravity of it just kind of gets diluted by the pivot to political strategy.
We move too fast from "the rats are coming" to "here's how to message our nationalism." We lose the horror of it.
Yeah, the connection between the rats and the solution isn't fully established. It feels like we leave the sewer too quickly. The quote is used as an intro hook, but it would work much better as a sword of Damocles hanging over the whole discussion.
If you show the monster at the beginning and then talk about policy for 10 minutes, people forget the monster is there.
Exactly. You need the monster breathing down their neck when you get to the decision point. So the advice is to bring back that sewer imagery right at the end to really raise the stakes.
So after we talk about emulation and Zionism as a model, we remind the audience of the alternative. We make it a binary choice.
You can have Zionism, or you can have the sewer.
Exactly. The script could end with something like, "The right has a choice. You can look at Israel and choose emulation and cooperation, or you can choose envy and destruction. But if you choose the latter, understand where that road leads. It leads back to the sewer, and the rats are already waiting."
Wow, that's powerful. It frames the argument not as be nice to Jews, but as civilization versus barbarism.
It makes learning from Israel a matter of saving their own soul, their own society. It completely changes the incentive structure for the listener.
It moves the conversation from policy to survival. And let's be honest, people don't change their worldview for policy. They change it for survival.
And that's really the theme of all this, isn't it? Incentives. How do you incentivize a hostile audience to listen?
You do it by aligning your arguments with their survival, their ego, and their logic. That's the secret sauce. You have to step out of your own desire to be right and step into their desire to be strong.
Okay, let's recap the actionable suggestions for the listener.
First, validate the homelessness feeling before you diagnose it as envy. Say, "I see your pain," before you say, "Your reaction is wrong."
Second, reframe emulation. Don't ask them to be students, ask them to be peers. Use Israel as a proof of concept to avoid that condescending tone.
Third, maximize that logical incoherence argument. Stack the contradictions up front to prove irrationality before you offer the spiritual explanation.
Fourth, integrate the documentary seamlessly. Make the reversal of Cain and Abel the thematic bridge to the reversal of history in the film.
And finally, use that sewer imagery to bookend the entire piece. Start with the threat and end with the threat. Make Zionist emulation the only way out.
It's all about taking a piece with strong intellectual bones, which this one definitely has, and just refining the rhetoric so it can actually penetrate the defenses of the people who need to hear it most.
I would love to see how this evolves. I'd encourage the listener to refine the script with these lenses in mind, especially that audience alignment lens, and submit it again.
We look forward to seeing it. That is all for this critique.
Keep writing.